when this happens at the smallest level and the biggest level and meets in the middle, you have a tailspin of devolution and self-hatred and evil. And the question is, does anyone care enough to break the addiction? Is anyone courageous enough to go out and deal with this alone? Because you will be watched silently. A woman in Point Richmond was recently raped. 20 people recorded the rape on their cell phones and did nothing. This is the cult of American abuse cycle. When a student of a school called, participating in the Room of Love, writes to 600 participants and team members, and not a single one challenges the abuse cycle, 20 cell phones watching someone get raped. The damage is calling that love. It is incredibly hostile towards the psyche and the soul. It is hostile towards the feminine. Love has nothing to do with it. And loyalty to addiction patterns, nothing to do with it. The real damage comes when cruelty, when masochism and abuse is relabeled as love to protect the feelings of the abuser, who is in turn protecting the feelings of the people who abused them. It's not personal. And it is astounding. It is astounding that there has yet to be a single advocate of truth that says, not on my watch. Now that's a testament to my wife. And it's partly a testament that I've gotten myself out of this culture to a certain extent. There is no free lunch. You get what you pay for. If you're satisfied with this bullshit, it will continue until you say enough, enough, enough. We deserve better than this. But where is your outrage? Is it at the message? Is it at the message bringer? Or is it at the underlying pain and the power structure that leads to this, both within the human ego, within the power structure in the community, within our government, within our culture? And of course we will see, and I'm making a documentary about that. That's part of my ethic to the culture. So you can embody the defense, and I will document that, and that's useful for the culture to see. Here's the hate you're likely to encounter if you tell the truth in this culture. Here's the defense you're going to encounter if you tell the truth in this culture. Here's the group of people that will say nothing until a few people join in, and then they pipe up. Oh yes, that's terrible. But they need 5 or 10 companions. This is what this culture is built on. Here it is, laid out there for you. So there's one other there's a couple of other things. My ethical responsibility. I don't like the fact that I never learned about trauma from a single therapist in $150,000 worth of work. I learned about trauma from a stranger in a cafe. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that people are paying for therapy today who are not going to get what they need to succeed. I don't like that. And so my ethics there, if I don't just want to complain, if I want to do something, is these videos and messages are going out to varieties of therapists. And I'm encountering defenses in that sector as well. Therapists don't want to be on film, they don't want to talk about it because they haven't sorted this out either. A lot of therapists embody the abuse ethic. And so, their clients aren't giving them shit. They just show up and do whatever they're told and pay them. And so they're not rocking that boat. So I'm making a focus to create videos and media and YouTube channels, etc., that talk about this. That's my ethic to having better informed therapists. And just talked with a recent therapist. I said, would you like to be on camera? Would you like? No, 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 no. I don't think we're the right fit. I see. Well, would you at least be interested in learning about abuse cycles within the therapeutic community? Oh, okay. So I sent her links to the videos, and so I've done that with a few hundred therapists and counting. And then it's also my ethics of understanding the ways I've participated in sexually abusing women, because I believed what the high facilitators said when they said, everyone's at choice. You're not when you're in a traumatic abuse cycle. You're in unconsciousness. So you're not at choice, and what you say doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's good for your soul. So if I ask a woman, may I have sex with you? And she says yes, means absolutely nothing. Just means she said yes. You have to look at the body. You have to talk about the abuse history. You have to see what happens. You have to involve. You have to see who's coming in. For example, if a 6-year-old girl comes in, as will happen with many women if they're treated tenderly, that 6-year-old girl is not interested in abandonment, meaning that 6-year-old girl has no interest in a one-night stand. If she shows up, she wants a dad. She wants someone to hold tight to. That's what 6-year-olds want around the world, throughout time, male or female. You got to find out who you're dealing with and why. Because if the 6-year-old says, okay, daddy, you can have my body, don't leave me next time, and you say, oh, that was a nice fuck the next day, you have just destroyed the innocence of a 6-year-old. You've participated in the most evil aspect of our culture, and that woman is going to shame and blame the 6-year-old for having hurt feelings and say, no, I'm cool, because that's what our cult does. It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. I've participated in sexual abuse. Every woman was at choice to say things they knew nothing about. Some of them were traumatized. Some of them sent me mixed signals in their body, and I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, because I was educated by the Human Awareness Institute. That doesn't fly for me. I feel grief, remorse, bitterness, and great sadness that I was led into that narrow frame and hurt people. So this work is also for them. The ethics are, if I damage innocence in this and that way, well, let's do my part to repair some of it. When someone will sacrifice and will fight, you're dealing with an adult, first of all, and it restores innocence. You see, the village gives the virgin to the dragon. The dragon says, I want a virgin. I want some innocence to eat. I'm greed. I'm lust. You don't want me to knock down your whole fucking village? Give me a virgin. Well, every night, the culture sends out its innocence. The dragon eats it. Well, St. George has a different agenda, risking his life to fight that dragon. That restores innocence to the psyche. We're dealing with, the reason these legends and stories are so important, they're dealing with terrain in the psyche. Are we in an abuse-enabling dynamic in which we give up our innocence to feed our addictions? Is that what's going on inside? Or are we in a warrior dynamic where we slaughter the reptilian addiction cycles, but also restore peace and safety to the community, bringing health and life to the psyche, inside and out? Well, High is a community that offers up its innocence to the predatory aspect of its facilitators and then stands by. And that is not a growing community. That is a lust and a secret cult that has no hope until it is dismantled or challenged. And of course, this goes on within each of us as individuals. Do we sell out our own innocence, pretend to be cool in order to get fucked, so we can meet our lust agenda, our cool agenda? Or do we listen to those feelings that want to come out and create a safe and healthy container? It's worth noting that it's only been 40 or so years since the sexual revolution. Every culture in human history has had some sacredness around sexuality, some sense of the feminine, some sense of container. And whether that's the brutality of the patriarchal marriage and belonging, or whether that's the sharing of, women picking their own partners, or whatever it is, there has been a sacredness and a container. High teaches a sexual abuse, a physical STI container. Let's have a safe sex conversation. Meaning, let's talk about whether you can give me a physical disease. How about a safe sex conversation that deals with the emotion in the feminine? It says, let's look at whether you can heal the rifts in my soul or violate me again. Let's have a safe soul conversation before we invite the soul in with the beauty of lovemaking. So much more dimensional than the addiction of fucking. The beauty of lovemaking needs container, needs gentleness. This is the disease. The feminine, honoring attunement. So simple for any single person in this entire group to respond. What do you need? How do you feel? How can we respond? What do you need? How do you feel? Which parts of you are honored and which parts of you are dishonored? Takes 30 seconds to ask those questions. Takes an hour or so to listen. And attunement is food for the soul, for all of our souls. But can we give that to another when we have not given it to ourselves? There's one more ethical issue. Peter to Weepa. Who's Weepa? Well, Weepa is the woman who Peter recommended that I marry. He had a hit, and then he stuck with it for months as it became the most traumatic and inappropriate relationship of my life. He kept saying, Dane, all I can say is that this is the most luminous possibility that I can see for you with my psychic powers. We have Linda Cesara as well, who's teaching Peter his psychic powers. And my ethics to Linda Cesaro, since Peter used her credibility to exaggerate his ability, was to let Linda Cesaro know exactly what went on with Peter and I. And her lack of ethics was to say nothing, meaning she did not show up to support or validate or apologize for the fact that a student had used her name to boost, this ability. So she chose, like the facilitators, to be silent, which again is Peter being set up with another faulty teacher. Peter talked with an energy healer while all this was going on, and the energy healer told Peter that it had nothing to do with him, that it was all me. And so that's what Peter told me, right? It was such a relief for Peter his lawyer was telling him that, I ought to do this, and his healers were and then Sarah backed him up and said it was wonderful for Peter. And then the facilitator said, we know you didn't do anything. This is all a setup for Peter to do enormous damage following expert advice that is no more expert than his own. Well, Weepa nearly committed suicide. A family honor was rifted. She lost her job that she'd spent 2 years trying to get. the fallout of me trying to pursue this marriage that Peter was pushing for. I would bring him the data. I would say, I had to throw her out of the apartment. She wouldn't leave. She's hurting me this way. This is this. The parents hate this. This. I would just report the data, and Peter would report his psychic vision. His psychic vision, which was that this was the most luminous possibility. And $60,000 later, I was flat on my back, and I ultimately paid Peter to try and get some emotional satisfaction by asking him for an apology. The whole thing didn't work. This was the only woman in my life who asked me to pay her father $26,000 to marry her. I said, I don't want to marry you. She says, well, you have to marry me or you can't spend time with me. I'd talk with Peter. He'd say, well, all I can say is the most luminous possibility for your future. I finally had enough, but by that time I was fried out. This was while Peter was doing his betrayal dynamic. He would not talk about our container. He would not support me around the psychedelics. He would just try and get me to marry Weepa. Well, this did a lot of damage to Weepa's family because it was never an appropriate match. I had known Weepa a week, and rather than Peter saying, what, I must be off here, marry someone you've known for a week who is completely inappropriate in this way and this way and this way, this never occurs to someone with great psychic powers. And so he looked at me like how astounding it was that I only knew her a week, and yet I already should marry her. It's like, every bit of data was flipped as if, somehow meant to be. Well, $60,000 later, I was flat on my back, still no clarity and closure around my relationship with Peter. He didn't want to talk about that then either. He said, let's talk about it later. And this is Peter's stalling game. And I was all alone. Again, no one in my life. Are we ever going to talk about this? Are we ever going to I'm exhausted. I'm $60,000 poorer from the 2 months I spent over in Thailand courting Weepa. Weepa's a mess. You see, Peter's ethical responsibility is to own up, to say, gee, I was scared about what went on, Sarah told me not to go anything like this. I told her what was wrong. She was mad, I can't talk about it. So I'm letting you go under the bus here. And you've got some woman over there. I would love it if you would go and focus on that rather than this, because this is a mess. And I'm not going to tell you that because, well, I'm not an adult. I'm an addict and I need to look good and all that. And I just open a can of worms, and Sarah doesn't want me to do that and all of that. So if you would just go and marry this woman, it would be wonderful, and then live happily ever after over there. Then, Peter can apologize to Weepa for costing her job. Because I would tell Weepa everything that Peter told me. I said, Weepa, I normally would not be dating you. You're a virgin, you're stubborn, you hate everything about what I do, you're constantly trying to change me, you've got a government job in some distant province that you fought hard for, I don't want to take it away from you, and I hate that province, I like swimming in the water. This is a disaster. But I have a shaman. Peter Sandhill. He says this is my future. So I'm trying to give it a shot. Poor girl. I was her first lover. Ruined the Thai traditional family. She ended up lying to her family because she was caught, between she shouldn't have sex before marriage. She didn't. But now she understands that this is not my style, etc. I won't lie to her family, but she will. It's a disaster. Peter has an ethical responsibility to own up and apologize and pay the damages to this family and to myself. That's the ethic if you want to restore trust. It's not the ethic of Peter Sandel, it's the ethic if you want to restore trust. Meaning, would you ever want a psychic driving you literally insane to do the most absurd things possible, to cover their own skin out of fear and not able to own up as you and someone else goes into, trauma and, large expense, just so they can avoid dealing with their own issues? It's not the kind of psychic I would send people to. And I wouldn't be proud if I was Linda to have given birth to such a student using her name. Nor would I be proud that Linda doesn't see this as her issue. It's not Hi's issue, it's not Peter's issue, it's not Linda's issue, it's not the community's issue. Our cult is about shaming the sexual abuse survivor, the psychic abuse survivor, the therapeutic abuse survivor, the traumatic abuse survivor, with the message that you don't belong here unless you shut up and stop telling your truth. As long as we have that message, we will kill the soul in our culture. We will destroy the feminine in our culture. We will be so unhappy we will need endless addictions to manage the pain. Suicide will be a factor, as will domestic violence, the externalization of the violence within. And if we are dumb enough to call that love, we will go insane. The choice is ours to participate by causing, by allowing, or by killing the dragon, which begins within. Thank you.